Good afternoon. I was to speak earlier this morning at around 10:30, so we are really pressed with time, so I really request that you bear with me to come before the Mayor, so I really thank you for your indulgence, Mayor. Kobe and Hastings have raised some very fundamental issues, and I think my duty will really be to reflect and comment on some of the things that they have raised this afternoon. Yesterday, in a smaller room than this one, just across the corridor, we launched the Africa Waste Outlook. This is a project that has taken us 2 years as UN Environment, with a partnership with many scholars around the continent of Africa, to develop and to draw our specific recommendations in terms of how we see solid waste management being much more sustainably addressed in Africa. What we concluded in this report that was launched yesterday is that there are huge untapped opportunities within the waste sector. But this requires a change in paradigm, a paradigm shift, where we start seeing waste as a resource, where we embrace and incorporate recycling, and we see the social and technological innovation possibilities around waste. In this report, we conclude that there is an opportunity of about $8 billion within the waste sector in Africa. This is indeed untapped resources. The growing urbanization, as was mentioned, the global change, climate change, disasters and risks across our continent are huge ways, and I'd like to reflect a little bit on what the Premier this morning said in a very impressive and inspiring talk to us this morning, that require new innovative ways of responding to these challenges, but more importantly, more innovative ways for financing. I would like to reflect a little bit on what Kobe said with regard to where the gaps exist. Over my 25-year career, both in the field of urban development and now in environment, I have always listened to many mayors, many practitioners, many researchers on city development lamenting about the urban infrastructure funding gap. And I've always questioned myself, why is this situation not ending? Is there a shortage of capital? Investors of hedge funds, investors and insurance companies are operating actually in low yields. They are at near zero interests, and we are seeing a glut in savings across Africa. So is there indeed an urban infrastructure funding gap? My feel is that there is a lack of bankable projects. So the bankable project gap is what exists, as Kobe said. Our city projects are not attractive at all. City investments projects actually scare investors. They scare financiers. We need to rethink how we package our projects to be more attractive. And I think the closing remarks by Hastings were quite interesting with regard to the need for an integrated approach, looking at a systems approach in terms of how things interact, looking beyond the surface into our stormwater drains, as well as looking at water supply, clean water supply for our cities. Looking at the need to expand our infrastructure in terms of electricity access, as well as looking into renewables. But are the investors, are financiers also thinking in this dimension? We see that most of our financiers and investors are really much focused and more of the time looking at projects that to address a single issue. For instance, the African Development Bank will have somebody who will look at water supply. And when we look at water supply, for us, we will be coming in and looking at the environmental risks with regard to watershed management, with regard to looking at the ecosystems that supply that water resource in terms of sustainability, in terms of providing water for the future generations. How can we be able to integrate these environmental risks and environmental benefits into our packaging of our financing packages? How do we go to scale? What are some of the limitations? I would like to highlight very quickly a few of them that limit us from coming up with bankable and attractive projects. At times, there's disagreement over guarantees. Who's going to take the guarantee? And again, it goes to the fiscal decentralization, responsibility, etc. There is concern about taking political risks. When you come from places where the mayor will change every so often, who bears that political risk for that city in terms of even taking the guarantees? Investors only have sometimes a good understanding of single assets, as I mentioned, and therefore tackling complex issues and integrated issues such as urban sprawl or a multi-sectoral coordination that the Sustainable Development Goals are requesting us to do is not really a normal working business for some of these investors. And therefore, for us to be more responsive, and some of the recommendations I will be making as I close, is the need for cities to make a much more long view, embrace visioning approaches, embrace strategic planning approaches, embrace strategic management approaches that cut across sectors within your own cities. So comprehensive perspectives, shared vision, and shared value, not only with the city management, but also with the citizens of the city, is what is basically being called for. The need for public-private partnerships and embracing the private sector as a trustful partner in terms of expanding our delivery of basic services will be crucial if we are to meet those financing gaps. Effective governance and collaboration models that allow citizens and communities to express and participate in the core design of bankable projects would be very useful. We need to start thinking metropolitan. We need to start thinking beyond our city or municipality boundary in order for us to leverage increased financing. And finally, we need to develop systems within our municipalities, and this was mentioned by the first speaker, systems that are transparent and that allow people, and not only the financiers, but even we as citizens, to be able to see through the thought process of our city leaders, our city management, in order for us to have a buy-in and to support any of those projects and proposals and programs that the city leadership will be putting in place. So I just thought I would share those few thoughts with you, and I will just beg your indulgence because I'll have to leave right now. But if you would like a copy of the Africa Waste Outlook, it is available now on the UN Environment website. The link is there and you can be able to download to see much more details in terms of the opportunities that exist for us in the solid waste management sector. Thank you very much.